Back around 1981, I had a job that allowed me to travel all around Broward County. Because of this job, I was able to stop in at a fast food place, order a sandwich, and then drive to a spot of my liking to have a nice, relaxing hour lunch. And one day, I was off Las Olas Boulevard and found this beautiful little park next to a church. Found out later it's called Cooley Hammock Park. And there was this plaque that was perched right at the entrance to the little park. I walked up to it, and it told the story of something I had never heard of before, even though I'd lived in Florida for quite a while at that time. And that was the story of the Cooley Massacre. And that's coming up next on Tales from South Florida.
Let's take a talk down memory lane, 'cause the stories around here are just insane. Pirates World, to Sporto and Wolfie's too. Palm Beach to Key West, that's where we grew. These are the tales from South Florida for you. With your host, Bill Monty.
William Cooley, who lived from 1783 to 1863, was one of the first American settlers and a regional leader in what is now known as Broward County. In 1836, a terrible event happened, costing him the life of his family and almost his own life. The attack was known as the New River Massacre, also known as the Cooley Massacre, and it caused immediate abandonment of the area. William Cooley was born in Maryland, but little else is known about his life prior to 1813 when he arrived at East Florida, a province of Spanish Florida at the time, as part of a military expedition. He established himself as a farmer in the northern part of Florida before moving south, where he traded with local Indians and continued to farm. During the period in which the region was transferred from Spanish to U.S. governance, he sided with natives in a land dispute against a merchant who had received a large grant from the King of Spain and was evicting the Indians from their lands. Unhappy with the actions of the Spanish, he moved to the New River area in 1826 to get as far as possible from the Spanish influence. The Cooley property in New River had a house, about 20 feet by 50 feet, must have been a mansion back in those days. It was 1 story high and built of cypress logs. Cooley maintained friendly relations and trade with the Seminole Indians in the area, but events would soon spiral out of control, affecting not only William Cooley and his family, but the entire South Florida region. In the early 19th century, Creek Indians had moved from Alabama and joined the Seminoles. In 1835, white settlers killed Chief Creek, Alabama, and burned his hut in a dispute. As justice of the peace, William Cooley jailed the settlers, but they were released due to insufficient evidence after a hearing at the Monroe County Court in Key West. The Creek people blamed Cooley, saying he had withheld evidence, and the growing uneasiness between the Creeks and the whites led to the Creeks' immigration to the Okeechobee area. Major Francis L. Dade was a military commandant at Key West and received intelligence that Cuba and Spain were arming the Indians. Investigations did not confirm that rumor, however, and people didn't take it seriously. But reports coming from Fort Brooke, near present-day Tampa, noted that Indians in the area were resisting orders from the federal government to immigrate to Mississippi, contradicting the assertions made by the federal authorities that the Indians had agreed to immigrate peacefully. Dade, 2 companies of soldiers, and all of the available arms were sent to Fort Brooke at Tampa Bay, the port designated for the commencement of Indian immigration. The Indians answered by concentrating all of their forces in the New River region, and on December 28, 1835, Dade and 107 soldiers were ambushed en route from Tampa Bay to Fort King, near present-day Ocala. Only 3 soldiers survived. The attackers lost only 3 men. 6 days later, William Cooley led a large expedition to free the Gil Blas, a ship that had beached the previous year. The scale of the operation required all of the New River settlement's able men to accompany him. On the next day, January 4th, 1836, the Indians attacked the settlement. Between 15 and 20 Indians invaded the Cooley house, overpowering the tutor for his children and scalping him. Cooley's wife grabbed their infant son and tried to run to the river, but was shot about 170 yards from the house. The shot killed her and the baby. Cooley's 9-year-old son died from a fractured skull, and his daughter was shot. 2 of Cooley's slaves disappeared. The tutor's son heard the screams by the river and came back to retrieve his mother and 2 younger sisters from the house. He managed to escape, going south by boat to the Cape Florida lighthouse, and along the way warned the people at Arch Creek and Miami River of the attack, prompting them to flee as well. After the attack, the Indians torched the house and left without attacking other dwellings. The next day, William Cooley came back to bury the dead, although it is unclear who alerted the salvagers team to the attack. After staying at the settlement for 3 days, Cooley went to the Cape Florida lighthouse. One of the missing slaves appeared, reporting that he had heard the Indians ascribing the massacre to an act of revenge for Cooley's having failed to obtain the conviction of Chief Alabama's murderers. Cooley went back to New River and discovered the Indians had returned to loot the settlement and had burned several other houses and plantations. A claim for restitution of his losses was denied in 1840 by the United States House of Representatives. Arriving at Key West on January 16, 1836 aboard the steamboat Champion, he was appointed temporary lighthouse keeper and stayed until April of that year. Cooley resumed his life as a wrecker. Later that same year, he worked again as Justice of the Peace and assumed a position as a legislatively appointed auctioneer. Constant attacks by Indians amplified the demands of Florida community leaders, forcing the Navy to send Lieutenant Levin M. Powell to Key West. Lieutenant Powell built a small force of 50 seamen, 95 Marines, and 8 officers, and called on William Cooley to be his guide because of his knowledge of Indian leaders and customs. Powell had mixed success, although by December 1836, the situation was under control at the coast. Cooley went back to his usual duties in Indian Key, and not long after he moved to Tampa, although he still worked occasionally as a guide. General Thomas Jessup, who was headquartered in Fort Dade, made Cooley an express rider in early 1837 to deliver messages between Tampa Bay and Fort Heilman, a corridor of about 170 miles. That same year, though, reports circulated that William Cooley was spreading rumors about a Seminole chief leading a rebellion involving black slaves and Indians. Afraid that Cooley could be directly involved, the general had him interrogated. Afterwards, a disgusted Cooley resigned his position. By 1840, he lived in Leon County near the Homosassa River, where the Armed Occupation Act of 1842 allowed the distribution of 160-acre land grants. His leadership enabled him to not only get his own permit, but permits for 28 other settlers. And in 1845, he became the first postmaster in Homosassa and county commissioner of fisheries. From 1848 to 1860, Cooley acquired several properties in the Tampa region, including one at Worth's Harbor. He owned a general store in the city and eventually sold it to a member of the Tampa Masonic Lodge. Cooley estimated his personal wealth at only $10,060 in 1860. Cooley died in 1863 in Hillsborough County, Florida. His will was written in 1862, but recorded only after Cooley's death and filed by Francis Matthews, who identified himself as his son-in-law. In the document, Cooley is referred to as William Coley. Cooley left his estate to friends, charities, a woman called Fanny Ann, who is listed as his daughter, and 3 grandsons and 4 granddaughters. However, there was never any evidence that any of these people were blood relatives. And that takes us back to Coley Hammock Park in Fort Lauderdale on the New River right off Las Olas Boulevard. It's located near the site of his old home in the New River settlement, and it's the park where I first saw that plaque telling me the story of the Cooley Massacre. Just one more of the tales from South Florida. I hope you enjoyed this talk down memory lane and the story of William Cooley and the horrible massacre that changed his life forever. Please remember, hit that like button and subscribe button. The subscribe button is free. It just means you'll be notified when new episodes come up. We appreciate any comments that you want to send along. Also, you can give me a call at 754-800-3170 or email me at billmonty04 tales-from-southflorida@gmail.com. And if you have any suggestions or stories or ideas for future episodes of Tales from South Florida, be sure to let me know about those too. This is Bill Monty. Thank you for listening to Tales from South Florida, and I can't wait to take another talk down memory lane with you in the near future. Remember, always be kind and be safe.
Let's take a talk down memory lane, 'cause the stories around here are just insane. Pirates World, to Sporto and Wolfies to Palm Beach to Key West, that's where we grew. These are the tales from South Florida for you. With your host, Bill Monty.